inside the Mission Control AI War Room. That's what we're going to talk about here in episode 263 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you.
3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 263. This is the podcast that covers everything related to the people, process, technology, and strategy sides of transformation. It's also the tech-agnostic view of people, process, technology, and strategy. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, as well as part of Lander Talent. And we provide independent consulting services to clients that are going through their digital transformations. And joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for another episode.
Yes, it's going to be a great episode. It's going to be everything related to AI. We're going to talk about, first of all, some social media questions that we received. We'll get to the Q&A session there, and then we'll get into some newsworthy topics related to AI, including the Mastercard AI payment demo, and we'll talk about how Meta is going to use 6 gigawatts of AMD GPU. So we'll talk about what that means to AI infrastructures across the world and the future of AI. And then later in the show, we will talk about, we're going to actually dive into Third Stage's Mission Control AI ERP War Room. So we are going to dive into our AI tool set to start prompting it and asking it questions and lessons from hundreds of clients that we've worked with over the years. We've loaded this information and data into the tool. We've trained it with our methodologies. We've trained it with our thought leadership and our tech agnostic view of the world. And now we're going to prompt it with questions that you all have. I've got some to get us started, but we're going to ask the audience to get involved as well. So stay tuned for that. That should be a really interesting conversation and see what AI can teach us about some of the detailed battle scars and lessons on these projects. And then finally, later in the show, we'll talk about why employees are quietly resisting AI. They may not be as excited as you think they are, and they may not be as excited as you are as a leader in the organization. So we'll get to all that here and more in this episode. But before we jump into all that, what sort of Q&A do we have from the audience here today, Darian?
Yeah, a couple of questions from the audience here today. The first one being, are the business value line items directly derived by the business requirements? At least a strong correlation. There must be no question mark.
Yeah, I would agree that yes, they should be. They're not typically, though. So requirements line items, if you have a business requirement and a need, like, for example, if you know that you've got a broken process where you're either inefficient and you're spending too much time doing something, or you're not getting the results that you would want because you don't have the right information you need, or there's a bottleneck or whatever the case may be, there's a lot of those line items that should translate to some sort of business value, and that helps you prioritize the business requirements as well. And it also helps the team ensure that they're accountable for the success of the project and that the team is focused on actual business results, not just technology for technology's sake and not just change for change's sake. We want to make sure that whatever change we're deploying is something that's going to deliver business value. And the best way to do that, or a great starting point to do that, is to go back to your business requirements and look at the pain points you're trying to address and the bottlenecks you're trying to address and the ways that you're trying to become more effective and efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great points there. Our next question today is, some of these cloud solutions like Dynamics 365 is not locking you into a set path to lose your advantage as a business. Yes, it gives guidelines, but you will still be able to extend and build your special sauce as a part of your ERP. The flexibility is both a blessing and a curse. Question is, how much of this sauce should be in the ERP, and what are you giving up removing all extensibility from the ERP?
It's a great question, and it's a D365-centric question, but I'll try to answer it from that perspective as well as more broadly across the ERP space. It's actually difficult. It's more difficult for me to answer the question the way I want to answer it because we're specifically talking about D365, and I think D365 does have a lot more flexibility than a lot of the ERP systems out there. So with D365, it's built to be more of an open architecture. It's built to be an open platform for ISVs or third-party independent solution vendors. It gives them a platform to create more industry and functionally specific tools. It also gives you a tool set to customize the software if you want to. In addition, you also have all the other Microsoft tools like Power BI and Power Apps, and ways that you can mix and match and develop your own suite of technologies. But that's great for Microsoft, which gives you a lot of flexibility, but can also create a lot of technical complexity, which is a risk. But then you look at something like an SAP, or maybe to a lesser degree Oracle. SAP is generally less flexible than D365. You can do changes to the clean core in S4HANA using their BTP tool set that allows you to build customization basically outside the core, but it's limited in what you can do, and it's not as flexible as you might have been accustomed to with your old SAP legacy system like ECC, or certainly Microsoft D365, or the solutions that are out there. So I think a lot of it depends on the software you're deploying, but I do agree that building your secret sauce probably isn't going to happen in your commercial off-the-shelf vanilla ERP software. In fact, it won't happen there because it's by definition not going to be secret sauce, because everyone else is doing the same process and workflow. But it's the stuff you do outside of ERP, and how do you get the system to talk nicely with those areas of competitive advantage, and how do you build that competency or find that competency if your ERP system doesn't give you the flexibility of the tool set to do it? That becomes the big question you have to look at.
For sure. Yeah, super interesting. And a great question from the audience there. But I want to get into our next two articles, which both kind of have to do with some sort of AI background. This first one is specifically about Meta. So this article outlines Meta's decisions to deploy 6 gigawatts of AI compute capacity powered by AMPD GPUs shortly after expanding its AI chip partnership with NVIDIA. This move signals Meta's aggressive AI infrastructure build-out and highlights a deliberate strategy to diversify suppliers while scaling its generative AI ambitions. 6 gigawatts represents one of the largest disclosed AI infrastructure commitments to date. By investing heavily in both AMD and NVIDIA, Meta is scaling AI capacity while reducing reliance on a single vendor. This strengthens their negotiating leverage, improves supply resilience, and intensifies competition in the AI chip market. The key takeaway from this article is Meta is aggressively expanding its AI infrastructure while strategically balancing chip suppliers. This decision reinforces how hyperscalers are consolidating power through capital scale and diversified AI ecosystems. A couple questions I have, though, for you, Eric, on this. First being, is supplier diversification about cost control, supply security, performance optimization, or do you think all three, or what do you think the reason for that is?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it. It's all three. I mean, it's about performance optimization. It could be about cost. It's about scale. There's a lot of reasons why Meta would be doing this, and I think it's also interesting that how much of an impact that AI and cloud computing in general, how much resource is being consumed to build these big, massive data and processing centers. We have a couple clients in particular that sort of fell into the growth of AI data centers. One in particular is a company that makes piping and couplings for industrial purposes, but now with all the data centers being built throughout the world, they are seeing this huge boom in business. And so it's not just the semi-chip manufacturers that are seeing a boom here. It's also just the mass amounts of infrastructure that needs to keep being built to keep up with all the computing needs of cloud and AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, does AMD meaningfully close the performance and ecosystem gap with NVIDIA in large-scale AI deployments, or does NVIDIA still have the edge there, in your opinion?
I think for now, NVIDIA still has the edge, but there's going to be so much future growth and demand for these infrastructure components and players and partners in building out the cloud and AI infrastructure of the future. I wouldn't be surprised to see NVIDIA stay in its current dominant position. I also wouldn't be surprised to see someone else emerge as the crown bearer going forward. It's hard to say with as much change as we're seeing in the market right now. But NVIDIA is obviously a very strong, highly valued company. It's hard to imagine them getting displaced, but you never know with as fast as things are changing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question on this, will this level of infrastructure spending widen the competitive moat between hyperscalers and everyone else?
Yeah, I do. I was thinking that too, as you were saying, is it's like the bigger are going to keep getting bigger, and these big hyperscalers are going to have such massive scale and advantage over the smaller players that it's hard to imagine a startup, 5 years from now coming in and doing something that has a meaningful impact on market share, short of coming up with something completely disruptive and different that we don't even know about yet. Short of that happening, it's hard to imagine the current trajectory we're on, seeing someone totally totally displace them. But I think it does make you realize, Amazon has had scale on the e-commerce side of things, and they've proven what scale, how much power scale can provide to a player like that. But now with AWS, and now with Microsoft with Azure, and Google and Nvidia, all these players in the AI and cloud space, these hyperscalers have just such mass economies of scale. It's hard to imagine a smaller player being able to get anywhere close to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting. But I want to get into our next article of the day, which also has to do with AI, but this one is more about MasterCard in particular, which I feel like we've never talked about MasterCard on here. So AI is bringing in all the new things. This article covers how MasterCard's new AI powered payment demo that showcases how autonomous AI agents could initiate and complete transactions on behalf of consumers signals a shift toward agent-led commerce. So, Mastercard demonstrated how AI agents could securely search, select, and pay for products within defined user parameters. The focus is on embedding payments directly into AI workflows, enabling transactions without traditional checkout steps. This suggests a future where AI assistants act as purchasing agents, handling commerce interactions end to end while operating within user approved guardrails. The development highlights how networks are positioning themselves to remain central in an AI driven economy, ensuring trust, identity verification, and fraud controls remain intact as commerce becomes more automated. The key takeaway from this article is MasterCard is preparing for a world where AI agents, not humans, initiate transactions. Payments infrastructure is evolving to support autonomous commerce while preserving security, compliance, and user control. Eric, with all of this, one thing that I really have a question on is who owns the customer relationship in an agent led commerce model?
That's a good question. I think that's a risk or a point of uncertainty that companies that are dependent on AI agents are going to experience. So it gets back to the point of humans still needing to own or be responsible for some of these end-to-end processes for customers, for vendors, suppliers, all that stuff. So, who does oversee the agent, I guess would be the big question. So I would say your business process owners, whoever in the past would have owned the customer relationship or the customer experience, they're still responsible and accountable for what happens in a world of AI. So they've got to be able to manage to it and not defer to or let the AI agent run amok or run awry without having some sort of governance and oversight and involvement from the human side of things. Because I don't see a day where AI is going to be accurate enough to think like a human. It might get pretty close, but I think you're still going to have human involvement, and the humans will have to ensure that the AI models are trained appropriately and operating the way they want to, and have the right governance and processes put in place, just like you would have with employees. You want to give them a playbook for how to do their jobs. You have to do the same thing with AI agents too, and you've got to follow up and measure and pivot as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know the article talked about it a little bit on guardrails and different things like that, but what regulatory challenges emerge when AI agents control purchasing decisions?
Well, you've got not just regulatory issues, but also potential fraud issues too, because AI makes fraud a little bit more accessible, if you want to call it that, to where if you don't have, just like with a human, if you set up a human in a system to have the security authority and the security profile to be able to create a vendor and to pay that same vendor, that's a risk. And in Sarbanes-Oxley and other regulatory laws throughout the world are designed to ensure that publicly traded companies have controls in place so that sort of thing doesn't happen. But even if you're not publicly traded, it may not be as much of a regulatory issue as it is just an internal control issue. You don't want there to be the opportunity for someone to easily go in and set up a vendor, initiate payment, approve the payment, and process the payment, all without anyone knowing that you just potentially paid yourself. Set up Eric Kimberling LLC. I'm going to send $1 million to Eric Kimberling LLC, and no one's ever going to question it or need to approve it or know about it necessarily unless they go back and do an audit. So, and that does happen, and that's why they put these controls in place, is because it's not always the outside hackers that you've got to worry about. Sometimes it's your own internal people that get disgruntled or whatever. I mean, especially if you're a big company, you're going to have people that the more people you have, the more opportunity there is for something like that to happen. So it's part regulatory, and it's also partially just having the right controls and the financial controls in place to ensure that stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super interesting. I didn't think about that. So that's a great point. My last question I have for this is, will brands, in your opinion, compete for algorithmic visibility instead of consumer attention?
Say that again. Will brands compete for
algorithmic visibility instead of consumer attention?
Yeah, like maybe as a way to pursue the algorithm in the name of getting consumer attention. Maybe that's the way that they feel like they could get there.
Yeah, or I think I took this question as because consumers aren't going to potentially be the ones purchasing, it doesn't really matter for some brands to get their attention. It matters that they're visible to the AI search, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I found that really interesting as well to think about. Like if I wanted a shoe or something, and instead of buying it from the brand it's actually at, I could get it cheaper somewhere else. So it's versus, I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose for a lesser known brand, that's going to come in handy, to be able to get more attention and more visibility. So I suppose it depends. If you've already got that brand recognition and you've got the scale, then you could keep running your Super Bowl ads, your ads on the Olympics or whatever. But if you're lesser known, you don't have that kind of marketing budget. The more guerrilla style, let's go for algorithmic, whatever the word is, I can't pronounce it very well. Algorithmic attention versus just like you would with SEO. Back in the day, companies would do SEO optimization, and it's the same thing now with AI. So it could be a great way to get on the map for sure from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Super interesting for sure, though. But I'm excited to get into another conversation about AI today.
Yes, very excited. In fact, we're going to have AI join the show. AI will be a guest. It's Third Stage's Mission Control AI tool set. It's a tool that we've been piloting for months now. We've been in the process and still are in the process of loading tons of past client artifacts and data points. In fact, so far we've got tens of thousands of artifacts loaded into this tool set from so far over 200 different projects are represented in the sample, but there's still several hundred to go that we're still loading. But we've got a big enough sample size right now that we're using it on our current client engagements, but we're also going to test it out with you all and show you the tool set, not just to show you the tool or the technology, but to answer questions. So we're going to actually prompt AI to ask it some questions based on historic and current information from our clients across platforms, across industries, across geographies. So we're going to get in, we'll bring on AI on the show. We'll dive into and analyze some of Third Stage's client lessons learned from that AI tool set. And then later in the show, we're going to talk about why, even though we're talking about how cool AI is, and we're going to show you how cool it is here in the next segment, later in the show, in the last segment, we'll talk about why employees, and your employees in particular, are probably resisting AI more than you think. So we're going to talk about all that and more in the rest of this episode of Transformation Ground Control. Stick around. We'll be back with more.
When the soul of the city was laid to rest and the night's forgotten.
If you're about to embark on the jungle of digital transformation, check out my new book, Welcome to the Jungle. It's a book that just came out in late 2025. It's my second book, and it's a book that focuses on digital transformation failure case studies and talks about the lessons and takeaways from that. It's 300 pages packed of all the lessons and things that I've learned from having been an expert witness in lawsuits related to digital transformations, and also with our team helping clients recover some of their failed projects. I've included as many lessons I could possibly fit into one book here. You can read this book. You can order it anywhere in the world in hard copy format, which is this format here. You can get it in paperback. You can also get it electronically as well. Scan the QR code right here or go to the links below for your copy. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Born of a battle from heaven's hand, and now you know. And here I
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 263. This is the tech agnostic podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including the people, process, technology, and strategy sides of transformation. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski, and you can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So our next guest on the show is Mission Control AI. It's a tool set. It's an AI guest. Our first AI guest will be here today to talk about lessons from digital transformations, several hundred digital transformations that we've been involved with as a company. This is really cool because we so far have loaded over 200 different client knowledge bases into this tool set. And when I say client, I don't mean we took their client's information. We took our artifacts, our lessons learned, the things that we did to analyze these different projects, we consolidated it into this AI tool set. So now we can benchmark clients and we can learn from the data from all of our past clients, whether it's what to do to make an implementation successful, whether it's what software to choose and how they compare to one another based on reality, boots on the ground, not just what a vendor says. So a lot of data-driven insights that we're going to be able to get from this. And this is a tool set that we use with all of our clients now, which is really cool. So if you're thinking about becoming a client of Third Stage, now is a great time because we've got this really cool tool set that makes us a lot more efficient. We bill less and we actually deliver a lot more value because now we can pull from the collective knowledge of having worked with over 1,000 different companies over the years. And we've had, hundreds of team members that have been on this team at some point over the last 8 years. And now we've got all that information in one single place. And now we're going to dive into it with you here today. So let me show you real quickly what we're dealing with here. And you'll have to bear with me because a lot of what we're doing here it's all real time. It's live, obviously. But you're going to have to bear with me as I do prompting and multitasking, which I'm really not good at. I'm good at some things, but one thing I'm not good at is multitasking. So you'll have to bear with me. And I do apologize in advance for that. But I'm going to share with you real quickly my screen here, and I will show you what I have in mind here. So, but if you go to our website, you will see some good information here about the tool. And so here's a little bit about the tool itself. So this is Mission Control AI. This is something you can find on our website. Essentially what it is, it's a tool, it's a proprietary tool set we use that captures all of our digital transformation projects in an AI tool. So it's everything from, you can see here, requirements gathering, process mapping, current state and future state, system fit gap analysis, change impacts from a change management perspective, strategy and planning, midstream decisions, testing and validation. Basically, for all of our current active projects right now, and there's about 25 of them, I think, right now that are using this tool actively with projects. Every single meeting, every single deliverable, every single work in progress, every single client input into the process, all the artifacts, all the meetings, all the transcripts, the videos from every single meeting is getting into this tool set. And the level of depth that you can capture is pretty amazing. If you think about every single conversation that happens, every single decision that's made, now you've got a record of it, and it's no one's going to forget because it's well documented, even if someone didn't write it down. And I apologize, I'm showing you the wrong screen here. I went back to the wrong screen. So if you go to this here, you can see what I was just mentioning, the different tools here in terms of fit gap analysis and whatnot. In terms of why it actually works, the reason we started doing is, first of all, just to get better information and to mine the data that we have, because we knew we were sitting on a landmine of data, or a gold mine of data, not a landmine, a gold mine of data in terms of client data and results and software comparisons, strengths and weaknesses of different systems as we're deploying it and implementing it. So we knew we were sitting on this gold mine of info, but we didn't know what to do with it until we had this tool come along and develop this with the company we partner with on it. And the cool thing is that it works throughout all the different phases of the project, and it allows it to be objective and also trained by our methodology and by our philosophy to independent tech agnostic consulting. So we have a unique advantage here because not only are we working across industry, across the world, we're also working with different platforms, different systems, and different implementations, and we're capturing real-time information about it. And the other good thing is now we can actually use that to help clients instead of other firms that might specialize in one system that are also using an AI tool. They're still going to be focused solely on the technology for their AI usage, whereas we're looking at the entire program, including the operational, organizational stuff. But then the other part of it too is we are capturing objective information that we can now share with clients. So if you follow any of our thought leadership, we're not afraid to tell the truth as far as what actually happens in these projects and expose the risks and the things that decision makers and leaders need to know. And so having the data now to back it and having the objectivity combined with the data and the thought leadership and the methodology is something that's extremely powerful. And we're still, in the final stages of loading more and more of our historic client data into it. But we've already got, I think, about 250 already loaded in. 250 organizations are represented in some way in this data set, but we've got over 1,000 total. So there's a lot more to go, but we're focused on the bigger ones first, the ones that have the most data. So anyway, that's a little bit about the tool itself. In just a moment, I'll pull up a prompt here that we'll get into, and I'll see what questions you have. But in the meantime, I want to say hello to some additional people here online. Kasiana from Romania, thank you for being here today. Basile from the UK, thanks for being here today. And Sanjay on LinkedIn, thank you for being here today. So let me know what questions you have. If you want to dig into an AI tool, if you could dig into an AI tool to see historic information and patterns, that sort of thing, now is your time and now is your opportunity. So feel free to jump in with any questions you have. So the first thing I want to do here today is I'm going to show you the first prompt. And this is just a prompt that I did on my own just because I was curious more than anything. And you'll see here a document. I just cut and paste this into a Word document, the exact prompt I used, as well as the results from it. And the reason I do this again is because I don't want to dig around in there and poke around and have you have to watch me prompt it. And I also don't want to reveal client information if it comes up in the response. So I have a way I'm going to prompt it though to avoid that, hopefully. But you can see right here, this is the prompt I put in right before going live here in this discussion. I said, without mentioning client names, please tell me the 5 risks force ranked across all of our clients, knowledge spaces, and project folders. Base this on all active and historic client project artifacts. So I'm basically prompting it to go through not just our current clients, but every client that we've ever been involved with that we have documentation or artifacts on, help us force rank in terms of frequency and severity of some of the risks here. You can see the number 1 is inadequate organizational change management. And then it gives you, kind of a summary of why that is. The cool thing about this tool too is it if I were in the tool itself, it actually gives you citations, or it'll give you documents or artifacts it'll point to give you examples. The other cool thing, just like ChatGPT or any other AI tool that you're used to conversationally, I can then go in and say, well, please elaborate on this, or tell me which specific clients are having this particular issue, or the biggest or the most reflective of this issue. Or I could, as a leader within third stage, I can also ask it, tell me every single client that has a change management issue right now, and summarize for me what those change management issues are. I'm pretty sure that if I did do that, it's going to give me every single client in the database. I don't think it would pull out one that says, there's certain ones that don't have change management issues. But you can see here the severity and the frequency is what it's based on. It gives you a summary here. When I prompt it without asking it to mask client information, it'll actually give me a summary of some examples of what clients are experiencing, what the challenges are. I did the same prompt, not asking it to keep clients sensitive or confidential, and it did show me a list of some examples of clients that are having the biggest issues in these areas. So you can see number 2 is resource constraints, team fatigue, and SI turnover, vendor and SI turnover. So, having internal resource constraints, the SI has people that are churning and getting replaced or leaving the project. And then the team's getting tired. And this is a really interesting one. And I think this is the reality of where a lot of organizations are. I don't know, if I were to do this ranking myself, just based on qualitative experience and what's in my head, I don't think I would have put this one so high. So it's interesting to see that this tool did, because that tells me it sees something that I don't, and that our team maybe doesn't. And which is really cool, because I've always said, no matter how smart I think I am, or our team, or any other of you listening that are consultants, none of us have all the answers. Even when we put a small team together for our clients, whether it's 3 or 4 or 5, 10 people, whatever it is, you're not going to know everything that there is to know that you need to know about the complexity of managing these projects. And that's part of why they fail, is because it's so hard to keep track of all these moving parts and pieces, and to see all the risks as they transpire. And for me personally, this is an example of one where I didn't realize how big of a problem this was until, via a separate prompt that I did yesterday or earlier this week. I found that as I dug into it, I saw how pervasive it was across our clients. So that helps me understand what's going on, the pulse of every single client we have, which is awesome too, because I can't obviously be in every meeting, and I'm not in every meeting or status meeting or whatnot. So I can go in now and see and apply my knowledge and input across projects now without having to be in every single room or every single meeting. So that is another way to scale our knowledge across clients. And then number 3 on the list of the risk here is weak project governance, RAID discipline, and risk management immaturity. So this overall governance, project governance, not having the right controls in place, not identifying the actions, the risks, the actions, and decisions that need to be made. And so that is an interesting one. And so even in this case, it gives us an example of one client where they've got 263 overdue or outdated RAID items, and a risk register with only 3 active risks across a program with 2,000 plus requirements and 1,100 plus open issues. So that's a good example of a red flag. And that's the first thing I ask as a leader is, whoa, hold on. How is one of our clients doing this? Chances are pretty high, and I'm pretty sure I know which one this is, that it's one that we came in to recover. So a lot of times you'll see that this project is a mess and they've hired us to come in and clean it up. But at least now I can look at this and say, okay, as we go in, one of the first things we have to do is identify what the risks are and make some meaningful progress on that, because this client hasn't done that yet in this example. And of course, I can ask it to tell me, elaborate on point number 3, client by client amongst our active clients, and it'll tell me what exactly I need to know about that. Data migration, complexity, quality, and governance gaps. That's another one. So data is a big issue, obviously, across different projects here. And then number 5 is scope creep, budget timeline overruns, and unrealistic planning. That kind of ties back, or it very much ties back to number 3. So there's a bit of overlap there, but that's another one that makes a lot of sense. But for me, again, going back to number 2, I wouldn't have put this as number 2 in my top 10 ranking. I might have put it like number 4 or 5, 6, somewhere in there. But seeing that is such a high frequency and the severity being so critical, that makes me wonder now, what else do we need to do to help clients? Or do we need to recast some plans? Are there plans that are still unrealistic? All that sort of stuff. So it's a good early warning indicator. And then, of course, when we get down here, we can see some of the summary of how there's so much interrelation between it. And I'm just reading a note here, gaps to note, and this is the first time I'm seeing this part, so I'm learning with you real time. Formal risk quantification is sparse across most engagements, and post-go live retrospective data is limited, meaning lessons learned may not fully be captioned in the current artifact database, or the current artifact database. So that's an important point, and something that's another reason why we're continuing to add more data to the tool as well. So anyway, that's my first prompt, the first one I tried. I've also been poking around here asking, to compare different systems. What if I want to compare SAP and Oracle? What are the biggest strengths and weaknesses I should know about? It'll go across every single SAP and Oracle implementation, as well as every single SAP and Oracle comparison that we've done. And it'll pull and quantify and summarize data as it relates to that. So there's a lot of different ways you can use this, and really interested to hear what you all think and what questions you have. So I'm going to actually, before let's see if I can copy this comment here. Resistance. This is from Vasile on LinkedIn. Vasile says, resistance to change, is it mainly because the change is forced rather than involving the stakeholder to participate in the process? So I'm going to try and prompt the tool in a way that mirrors what you just said. So I'm just going to say, without mentioning client names. Okay. So I'm prompting it now. It usually takes about 60 seconds for it to pull up a question here, or pull up the response, because it's going to dig through a bunch of stuff. And I just loaded a ton of stuff last night. And so I think a lot of it's still processing. So it ends up taking a little bit longer, but actually it's already responding. So never mind. It's going to be fast, apparently. So maybe it did process all the stuff I loaded already. While we're pulling that up, I want to say hello to a few other people here. Lean on LinkedIn says hello from the Netherlands. Thanks for being here. Someone on LinkedIn, I don't see the name, says, hi, Eric from Pune, India. Thank you for being here today. And then we've got another question that came in, so that we'll pull up here in a minute. All right. So I'm going to pull up the prompt again. This is essentially how I prompted it. You heard what I put in. I put it in a little bit different. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I'm going to show you what it tells me here. And first, I'm going to make sure it doesn't mention any clients here. Yes. Okay. It looks clear. Yeah. It's giving me examples, but not client names, which is perfect. All right. So I'm going to go in now to so here's what we've got. This is the previous prompts. Bear with me. All right. So the new answer here, the new prompt is what you see at the bottom of your screen here. I'm just going to go to a new page and I'll drop this in. Okay. So this is a response to the question here of resistance to change. Is it mainly because the change is forced rather than involving the stakeholder to participate? Based on the patterns across your engagements, the answer is yes. Resistance is highly tied to change being posed top down without meaningful stakeholder participation. Here's what the data shows. So it does say top down forced change is a root cause. Little inclusion of people. One organization highlights a culture that questions decisions, has a low risk appetite. Another operates as a top-down product-first organization with silos. In one case, there's effectively no change management, and roles and responsibilities weren't resolved. And then another, information wasn't reaching lower-level employees, with a readiness score of 3 out of 10. And this is really cool, too, because we uploaded tons of organizational readiness assessments that we'd done across a few hundred of those clients. And now we've got metrics where we can compare new clients against other benchmarks and averages to show how do you compare to other companies that are going through the similar journey. If you're outperforming or in the upper quartile, you're obviously in a better position than if you're at an average or below average level. So it's interesting that they're pulling in some data. If I further prompt this, it'll give me more data too. If I want to say, show me how this affects organizational readiness scores, or show me how clients compare to one another across organizational readiness, that's another part of it. So stakeholder participation is the antidote. So it says that the data consistently shows that when organizations do involve stakeholders, resistance drops, and when they don't, it spikes. I mean, it's in a lot of ways common sense. The question itself, I think, is somewhat of a, I don't want to say it was rhetorical or hypothetical, or what's the word I'm looking for? The question that's there's an obvious answer to it, but you're not really asking it for an answer. I'm drawing a blank on that word. Anyway, the point being that I think rhetorical. I think the question is somewhat rhetorical in some ways, because I think a lot of us would probably say, yeah, it probably is why there's resistance to change. But now being able to have data to back it, to show that there's a correlation, there's an impact of not having stakeholder involvement is a big part of this. So they give some examples of one client wants to involve people from the start rather than pushing change on them in the end, whereas before the change was managed reactively or by accident. This is why I love working with clients that have already failed or struggled with their transformations at one point, because they know they've got the battle wounds and the scars to show for it, and they know what the price of not doing it right is, rather than having someone come in and tell them what could go wrong. They've actually experienced it, which is different. Critical success factors focus on inclusive governance, creating urgency, guiding coalition, developing vision and strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And then the change framework maps transition requirements, motivation, capability, participation, clarity, time to adapt, emotional support. So it even will give you, if I want to say now, tell me then how I can overcome resistance to change or build more of a stakeholder driven change plan. It'll give me recommendations based on what's worked at other clients, and also based on our methodology that we use with our clients. So the type of resistance at play, it talks about intentional resistance and unintentional resistance. And this is based on some of our thought leadership that we published and trained the tool with. If you see these books behind me over here, we've actually trained the tool with my books, with all of our thought leadership webinars, mastermind series that we've done with CIOs. A lot of stuff that you don't find on our YouTube channel. This is all stuff that we do internally that's being captured here. So the bottom line is the pattern is clear. Resistance is less about people rejecting change itself and more about not being part of shaping it. So that's a great prompt, and I appreciate Vasil, you asking that, because that's a great example of how this tool can be used. And of course, from here we can dig in and get more answers. Tell me, give me a methodology, or give me a framework, give me a template that I can use to start managing this with a client. And that's something we do with our clients there regularly. So we've got a few more examples here. James is joining on LinkedIn. James says, good morning from New Jersey. Are you doing this via Copilot? I missed the beginning of the war room. No, this is not Copilot. This is our proprietary mission control AI tool set. It's programmed with all of our proprietary client data from 400 plus different client engagements. So we've got all the artifacts, all the meeting notes and outputs and deliverables and work in progress and requirements analysis. Everything we've done for all these different clients have been loaded in and programmed into this proprietary tool set. So it's giving us information that you're not going to find on Copilot, because Copilot will give you, for example, you could go to Copilot and get a summary of my YouTube channel. I mean, according to my YouTube channel, what are the top 10 reasons why projects fail, or what are the top risks, or what are the best systems in the market, whatever you want. But that's all based on public high-level information. This is based on detailed client data information. So it's more of a granular, detailed view of the world. So good question. It's not Copilot. You won't find this in any other tool set, because it's not just about AI and conversational AI. It's about the data that's in it. And that's the real advantage we have as an independent tech agnostic company that has several hundred different clients. So that combination of thought leadership, broad clients across different platforms, and our experience implementing all these different systems just gives us a knowledge base that most won't have. Themba from South Africa on YouTube says hello. James on LinkedIn says very cool. Vasil says at number 2, I suggest a modular implementation strategy. I really love the Frappy ERP/ERP Next and other Frapp-based management systems. And I apologize, I always forget how to pronounce the word, if it's Frapp or Frappy. I know I mess it up half the time, so I always hedge. So good stuff there. Here's another question from Sanjay on LinkedIn. Sanjay says, do you think implementing AI in SAP projects is just a technical enhancement, or is a transformation initiative? It unfortunately oftentimes ends up becoming a transformation initiative, or being limited to a transformation initiative. But with Joule and some of the other AI tools that SAP has developed, it should be it's usually treated as a technical initiative, but it should be treated as a transformation initiative is what I meant to say. So the opposite of what I just said is what I meant. I think too often companies are thinking about, let's just throw in AI and hope for the best without necessarily having a good vision or understanding of what it is they're looking for. So good question there. So let me know what other prompts you want to use. I'm actually going to go steal some of my own here that I've been doing over the last several days and weeks of just being fairly obsessed with this tool set. So this is the top 10 SAP S/4HANA implementation risks based on our client evidence. So this is where it gets cool because, some might say that I'm guilty of bashing vendors at times, particularly SAP, and I am critical of vendors, especially SAP at times, but I do understand the value of the software, and a lot of our clients are implementing. In fact, most of our clients are. If I had to pick one vendor that's the most commonly implemented amongst our clients, it's SAP. So I've sort of a love-hate relationship with SAP as a company and as a tool set. But the reason why I pick on it is because I think in the industry there's this tendency to be very vendor biased, to say, if I'm in the SAP community or the Oracle community or the D365 community, there's a part of me that thinks that vendor can do no wrong, that is the silver bullet that the industry needs. And that's a good thing in some ways, because that's why you are probably a great representative of that vendor. But what it does is it unintentionally creates a blind spot amongst clients, which is why we're always trying to call out these blind spots and say, hey, S/4HANA is cool, but there's also some risk here. Not to tell you not to buy it or implement it. Absolutely do it if it makes sense, but don't do it if it doesn't make sense. And even if you do it, understand what the risks are so you can mitigate them, not because we want to create doubt or fear, but because you should be a little bit scared, because there's a lot of things to be afraid of in these projects. So that's just some backdrop of since the question came up around SAP and AI in particular, I wanted to ask it this question. So I'll pull up the response it gave me here. And again, the prompt, I said originally, the prompt was okay, hold on, that was a follow-up. So the original post or prompt was, what are the biggest problems, risks, or challenges with SAP S/4HANA implementations? Please force rank a top 10 list based on frequency and severity of the problems. And then it gave me a list that was kind of generic at first. So then I went in and said, what are the sources of the rankings? It went in and told me that a lot of it was coming from like SAP itself and outside information, which is something our tool will do. It'll still capture stuff and pull in info from that you could get in ChatGPT and whatnot. So there's a tiny sliver of that. But what I didn't want it just to be based on public information. I want it to be based on our experience. So then I had to ask it as a follow-up and said, base the ranking on third stages, client, project, workspace clients, and prospective clients. So it's looking at across all of our current clients, our historic clients, and even our prospective clients that we're talking to or we've talked to in the past. So that's what gave me the top 10 list. And then I had to go in and say, please recreate the list while hiding client names. So hopefully it did, because I didn't fully check it, but it looks like it did. Okay, so you can see number one, again, change management is the number one risk for SAP projects in particular. And by the way, if I run this for other vendors as well, it's probably going to be pretty similar. I haven't done a full comparison yet, but I did run it across like D365 implementations, and I think I did it for Infor implementations too, just because I was curious. And the lists were very similar. I think the rankings changed slightly, but for the most part, they were pretty consistent whether you're talking about SAP or anyone else. So this one, let me change my screen here. So this one, number one is organizational change management. So change management was the number one risk with these projects. It even said, one client had an executive support rating of 3 out of 10. Transformation agility for another was 3 out of 5. One had no readiness framework. And so that change management was the number one risk across those projects. Over-reliance on or problems with the system integrator. So you can see some of the comments here. It gives you some anecdotal examples. And if I want, I can say, give me more, let me see number 2 and expand, elaborate on that. Tell me more specific clients that have made comments or experienced this challenge. Unrealistic budget timeline expectations, scope creep, and poor scope management was another top risk for SAP projects. And then data migration complexity was number 5 on the list of top 5 SAP S4HANA implementation risks. Then you had project governance, excessive customization, which is still a problem even in an S4HANA environment, which is interesting because you kind of view that as a ECC or a legacy ERP system problem, but it's still a problem with S4HANA implementations as well. Insufficient testing, integration complexity, and then lack of internal resources. This one's interesting because lack of internal resources is a lot lower here than it was on the first prompt I did, which is to give me the top 5 risks across all clients and all projects. I believe that was number 2 or 3 on that list, but here with SAP projects, it's only number 10. Which is interesting, although it also ties into number 2 and 3, I suppose. So there's a lot of overlap here. It's not as clean of a break between these categories as you might want for structured data or turning unstructured data into structured data like this. This is interesting too. What I love about this tool too is it'll point out its own biases or biases in the data or things that might skew the data. And this one is super interesting here because it says key takeaway, the system integrator problem ranks number 2, reflecting the fact that clients often engage third stage because their SA relationship has gone sideways, which I love that because that's telling you, okay, it's number 2, but that could be skewed because that's the whole reason they're hiring third stage is because they're having problems with their SI. Now, if we were to go and look at non-third stage clients, would it be the same top 10? I don't know, but I think what AI is suggesting here is that it probably wouldn't be. It might be a little bit lower. It still might be up there, but it may not be number 2 on the list. So super cool prompt there. So again, keep the prompts going. What else do you guys want to know? We're here diving into mission control AI, understanding insights from digital transformations throughout the world. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I met her in a club down in Old Soho where you drink champagne and it tastes like Coca-Cola. C-O-L-A.
If you're leading a digital transformation or ERP initiative and you want to avoid the costly mistakes that most organizations make, that's where Third Stage Consulting comes in. We are an independent and technology advisory firm, meaning that we don't sell software, we don't take commissions from vendors. Our only job is to protect your interests and be on your side. We help executives and project teams plan, deliver, and recover digital transformations and ERP projects, reducing risk, improving adoption, and delivering real business value. If you want clarity before you commit to your digital strategy, or if something feels off track to you, feel free to reach out to us at thirdstage-consulting.com, and my team and I would be happy to help.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 263. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And we're here with Mission Control AI and the audience, prompting our Mission Control AI tool set to get some insights into clients that have been involved with digital transformations throughout the years. So Chris on LinkedIn says sometimes vendor bias is political or necessary due to business constraints. Very, very interesting there. And I tend to agree with you. And then here's a prompt I'm going to do. The question here is, I'm going to say without mentioning clients by name, tell me what gaps most commonly exist between executive perception and employee readiness. And what's cool, but what I like about this question, I'm curious to see what the response is, because this is a very like a squishy question. You know, there's not a lot of like data, like quantifiable data that you could use. So I'm curious to see, or maybe there is, and I just don't know about it. So I'm curious to see what happens here. No, I was wrong. It's actually giving me data. So I take that back. It's spitting out a response now, and I'll pull up the answer here in just a minute as soon as it's done. This is actually going, it's thinking a lot faster than it was yesterday when I was trying some of these. And I think it's because I had loaded just a ton, and our team was loading a ton of stuff yesterday, and it was still processing a lot of the stuff I put in there. Okay. So I feel like I can relate now better to software sales reps. You know, they're trying to demo their product while they talk, and I'd be a terrible sales rep. Maybe that's why I didn't do that for a living, because I feel like I'm demoing software right now, and I feel like I'm not doing a good job because I can't multitask. Okay, so enough about me. Let's talk about digital transformation. All right, so here's the prompt I said was basically this question here from Darian. You can see it. I'll leave it up at the bottom just so you can see it. But my exact prompt was, without mentioning clients by name, tell me what gaps most commonly exist between executive perception and employee readiness. And so it goes on to say, number one, strategic clarity. Biggest weakness areas, scoring as low as a 3 out of 10. Employees can't articulate the organization's strategy, and leadership assumes alignment exists. So that's very interesting there. Give me a lot here about executive visibility and support is something that is a big gap. Below the surface resistance. The ORA, by the way, stands for Organizational Readiness Assessment. That's something we do on most of our clients, if not close to all of them, just to understand the points of resistance, not in a bad way, but as a way just to uncover the sources of resistance, things that don't cause that intentional sabotage of a project, but they're things that'll make people anxious and uncertain, and ultimately cause them to potentially resist the change. So that's what organizational readiness is. So it's giving us some qualitative summary of what some of the organizational readiness results show. If I ask it to, it could give me quantitative scores here to back this more, especially on that one because it mentioned the ORA. So below the surface resistance, accountability. So lack of accountability is something that could be a challenge. Communications reach. This is interesting. Internal communications often score 3 out of 10, with past communications failing to reach effective parties or explain the transformational approach. And executives assume information is flowing when it's not. Change fatigue versus urgency, and then job satisfaction as a barrier. So, this is interesting. This actually just jumped out at me as something that I don't know that I would have said this or thought this until I read it here, but now I'm reading it, it makes sense. So it's saying that high job satisfaction, as high as 8 out of 10, can actually increase resistance to change, a counterintuitive dynamic where executives read employee contentment as readiness when it actually signals comfort with the status quo. That is super telling. That's super insightful, because it sort of matches a half-baked thought I've always had, which is, sometimes people that are, one thing I've said in other thought leadership is people that are really committed to and passionate about the vision of a company, like if it's a purpose-based organization, if like a faith-based organization or a nonprofit. A lot of times you see it in government as well, where people just want they want to help, like they want to help or be part of a movement or something that's helping other people. And anything that disrupts that or gets in the way of that, even if it's short-term and even if it's for the best long-term, it can create actually more resistance. We have noticed that with highly committed people. And we've also noticed it with highly educated people too. A lot of times the highly educated PhD engineering types, scientist types, sometimes they actually are harder to change than lower level people, simply because they're so smart and they need so much logic and explanation to make sense of the world. So anyway, this is really interesting. It sort of broadens my view of this a bit, which is how high job satisfaction can actually lead to more resistance to change. So very telling. See, this is why I love this tool, because it's teaching me stuff that it might have taken me another 10 years of doing this before I realized that is a true statement. And I actually totally agree with it now that I hear it out loud. So great prompt there. Thank you for that, Darian. So what else? What other prompts do you have for me? We've still got a few minutes left here, so I can keep digging into it. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, here's a comment from Chris. I'd say executives, this is Chris on LinkedIn. Chris says, I'd say executives don't often account for the amount of time employees will need to spend on the project. They don't hire additional product managers. When they do, they don't require or empower the product managers to require business outcome achievement or KPI. alignment. It's very true. So that resource constraint ties back to not only the number of people you have, but the quality of people you have and the amount of authority or accountability they have on the project. Let me ask this other prompt here. This is another one from Darian. So thank you, Darian, for the really good questions here. She's our podcast co-host, so we can always rely on her to have good questions and to bail me out when the audience is being quiet here today. So I'm going to type in again without mentioning client names. Search the knowledge. I'll be a little more specific here. I'll say search the knowledge base. What I love about AI tools, I can have typos and it won't really care. Search the knowledge base to determine how new clients typically score on organizational readiness compared to past, I'll say past client benchmarks. Okay. So while this is searching here, it looks like this one might take a little longer. It's searching more stuff now. Probably because that's another squishy one, right? It's going deep, it looks like. So it's searching a bunch of stuff here. All right. Here's another one I might. Oh, here's an interesting one. I'm going to do this one next. Compare the top 5 SAP S/4HANA risks to D365 Oracle projects. What's different and what's consistent? I ran something similar to that the other day. It's super interesting. I actually did one thing I did do while I'm just buying time. All this other output is working here. It's searching a lot of stuff. It's going through a lot of documents. I'm not sure what it's doing, but it's working. One thing I did is I said, show me the top functional differences between SAP and Oracle. I did it for D365 and Oracle, and it pulled out based on demo scores and implementation results. It showed what the actual functional gaps were, not just what vendors said they were in the RFP responses, which are usually overstated in terms of there not being much of a gap, but looking more specifically at the way employees that viewed a demo of a product, how did they rank the product, and also how did clients that have implemented the product rank the product? Those two pieces of data are a lot more important than what a vendor says in terms of their own self-assessment or whatever. This is really cool, this response. I'm going to pull up the Darian's question here again. So the question is, and it's spitting out the final result here, so it should just be another minute. I'll go ahead and share my screen and get this all set up and ready to go while it's doing its thing. And it's actually going to give us a lot of cool, looks like it's giving us a lot of quantitative info to go with this too. So I'm going to come down here. Here's the summary. Oh boy. Still, this is a massive response. Darian has opened a can of worms here, and AI is just going crazy, but we'll unpack it here real time. What's cool here too is, just to give you a preview, it's telling me how to benchmark new clients and what levels they can expect to be at in this. So let's go back to the summary here. So the question again is, how do new clients typically score on organizational readiness compared to industry benchmarks? So here I'm saying that across 8 past organizational readiness, new clients, so this is just looking at new active clients, new clients typically score in the 3.2 to 3.9 range on a scale of 1 to 5, in that mild, moderate potential resistance zone. Talks about how strategic clarity and the case for change consistently rank highest, while transformation agility, internal comms, and operational capabilities are persistent weak spots. So this is interesting because this shows you across past clients what's the average. And so strategic clarity actually rates high for past clients. So it's one of the strongest areas, or actually the strongest rated area. And then you can see down here the weaker areas: transformation agility, operational capabilities, performance and accountability, internal comms. These are the weakest areas. And then you can see culture, strategic clarity are actually higher. That surprises me. Actually, culture, I think culture, we have a lot of clients with really strong cultures, which I would argue actually can create problems unintentionally if you have a strong culture. So that one doesn't surprise me, I suppose, because strong culture, in my opinion, can equal more resistance. because you're threatening to disrupt that culture in some way, even if you don't mean to. But the strategic clarity is interesting. I actually would have thought that was lower, especially because now I would have thought it's trending downward in a negative way, because now so many organizations we work with, qualitatively at least, come to us and say, hey, we need to implement a new system because we have to get off our legacy system, which typically is not a good enough reason to do it. So it's interesting that that is rated so high. So again, this could be an example where, I'm not going to throw out my opinion or disregard it, but it makes me second guess it, or maybe not second guess it, but shows me that maybe I need to validate my thinking here, because I would not have placed strategic clarity as the number one strength of our past clients. So, and in fact, as a prompt to follow up, I'd say, why is that? Why is strategic clarity rated so high? How is this, give me examples of current clients that have those high scores. On the flip side too, I'd say, let's unpack this culture thing. Is this really a positive thing? If the ratings are high, how would culture affect, or could culture affect resistance to change? So that allows me to dig in and have a conversation to unpack the data in more detail. So here it talks about the consistent strengths, consistent weaknesses, which we just talked about. It talks about the tenure effect here. So tenured employees generally rate readiness areas higher than newer employees. In one engagement showed an overall readiness score of about 3.91, mild strength. I'm trying to understand that. So tenured employees generally rate readiness areas higher than new employees. So maybe there's a comfort that goes with tenured employees. They assume that we're ready. Back to that point about people being comfortable with the status quo. Maybe that job satisfaction as a result of the status quo, and disrupting the status quo actually could jeopardize their job satisfaction, which might be the same thing here with tenure. The reason they've stuck around is because they like the culture, they like the way things are today, but they don't necessarily like the way things are going to be in the future. And so it's easy to mistake this as a positive thing. So that's an interesting thing. I'm learning as we go here. So thanks for unpacking this with me. Based on the benchmark, a new client entering should expect, looks like kind of mild or moderate results here. Strategic clarity is likely to be their most important or strongest area. And then it shows you the areas where they're likely to fall below. But what's cool now is we get a new client, we can actually benchmark and say, well, here's how you fall, or how you compare to other organizations, where you're strong and where you could be stronger. And it gives you some gaps. No single master benchmark document aggregating all past client ORA scores exist. It was synthesized from individual client deliverables. So, however, I know this because I did it yesterday. I can ask it to aggregate the data, and it'll give me a benchmarks category by category. It'll also show me client by client how they compare against those benchmarks. So it can do it. It just didn't do it here for this response, since I didn't get into that much detail, apparently. So that is a very good question. And then there's another one that I wanted to get to. Let me try this one here without mentioning client names. I said without mentioning client names, search the knowledge base to identify recurring challenges and documented risk mitigation strategies that impact budget performance and schedule performance across ERP implementations. What methodologies and tools are best to mitigate risk? And it's already given me, let's go through a couple iterations here. So that, by the way, this question is from Chris on LinkedIn. For those that are listening in without the video, Chris on LinkedIn asked the question of recurring challenges and documented risk mitigation strategies that impact budget performance and schedule performance across ERP systems, or across ERP implementation. So what's cool here is that it's looking at it's not discriminating based on software vendors. So it's looking across the board. So here's the response it came back with. Variables with the strongest and most direct impact on the level of operational disruption include clarity of defined business processes. Those that spend more time defining clearer business processes experience less disruption. Level of executive alignment among key stakeholders in the transformation project team. Those that rated higher in executive stakeholder alignment and project team alignment were less likely to experience disruption. Time and effort spent during user acceptance and testing and confidence pilots, the less likely they were to experience disruption. So testing, alignment, those are all, and clearly defined business processes are all important. So the top methodologies to overcome risks across projects, independent project quality assurance. That's a service we provide at third stage, but having that governance, that quality assurance process in place is important. And if I didn't know any better and I hadn't done a quality assurance project before for a client, I could go in here now, ask it, how could I do a quality assurance assessment, or give me the methodology, give me the framework, give me the templates, give me the playbook for how to do this. And it's the third stage playbook. So now you can go in and pull that information of how, if I was doing it, this is how I do it. And now AI knows how I would do it and how other consultants on our team have done it. Organizational readiness assessment is number 2 way to mitigate time and cost risk. Risk register with probability and impact scoring. So not just having it, but having an accurate and objective risk register, which relates to number 4, which is canary in the coal mine, early warning indicators. I want to make sure you have that. Comprehensive testing methodology, embedded change management, and critical success factors for schedule. I'm going to read this one just because it looks like it's a catch-all for other stuff, but critical success factors for schedule include thorough upfront scoping and decision-making, avoiding delays during design and build phases, significant training investments as the new system will require changes to how people work, and expert support for vendor negotiation and contract terms. So the bottom line from its analysis here, the final consensus here is that the knowledge base consistently shows the budget and schedule failures stem from underachieving in people change, poor executive alignment, inadequate testing, and over-reliance on SIs. The most effective countermeasures are independent quality assurance, structured organizational readiness, rigorous risk registers, and embedded change management, all executed continuously rather than one-time activities. So there you go. That's how you avoid time and cost overruns. If only it were that easy. If only AI could just solve that for us. But at least we know now what it is we need to do. We may not know how yet, and that's something that, I mean, I've done it before, but if I forgot or I just want a refresher, I want to get a consolidated view of what's worked best across all of our clients, I can now prompt it to say, well, show me a quality assurance framework that would work best given this situation, this particular client situation. And it'll take our methodology, it'll tailor it based on who this client is and what the nuances are of their industry and what they're trying to accomplish, which is even cooler because that saves us a lot of time from having to modify our methodologies to fit specific clients there or specific needs there. So interesting stuff. So Chris then, as a follow-up on LinkedIn, says maybe they got strategic clarity right after you arrived. I'd like to think so. So thank you for that. It could be. Michael on YouTube joins from Jakarta. Thank you for being here today. And then again, if you've got any prompts you want me to get to, I'll keep going for as long as you want, or not as long as you want, but a few more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up. But here's a question I want to get to just because it's a big one. But I'm going to say without mentioning client names, one thing I've noticed about this tool is you have to clarify. Sometimes you have to clarify, like the way the tool is set up is you've got your active projects set up as accounts. And so there's like 40 of them right now, or 35, I think. They're set up as accounts, and it'll search that, the current clients first. And you have to tell it to then go back to the historic files that have been loaded from before we started using this tool, back before AI existed, or before this AI tool existed. So I have to clarify, don't just look at current clients that you captured, in your tool set organically. Also look at the files that we've loaded from historic clients. So that's why I have to change the prompt to be slightly more specific. And I think I'm hoping it eventually learns and stops making me prompt it that way. But if I have to type a few extra words, that is worth the price of admission here for sure. So let me get ready to show this to you because it is spitting it out right now. And I'll learn with you on the fly here again with what AI thinks about SAP versus Oracle versus D365 in terms of the risks on those projects. And this is a good one because I imagine a lot of you are implementing one of those three or have experience implementing one of the three. So I'll be curious to see if any of this resonates with you once I get the response here. It's going through cost overruns, cloud maturities, looking at change management and people impact of the three different systems. And now it is giving me a table that compares the three across different risk factors. So that's cool. If I needed to do a PowerPoint presentation for a client, or a client asked me in a meeting to, on the fly, give them an answer to something that I don't have in my head, I can quickly ask AI to go get that information for me. And what's cool too is even though I started this company and I have more exposure to more projects than anyone in the company, just because I started it and I've been here from day one, I still don't know everything. I still don't know everything that we've done for different clients and all the lessons that have come with it. And this tool does make me realize how I think I know a lot, and I stand by that, but there's a lot I don't know about our existing clients, our past clients, and all that stuff. So I apologize. This one's taking a little longer than normal, but it goes through iterations and it keeps refining it based on my instructions here. And so just give it a second. Bear with me. I'm curious to hear from you all too. If any of you have been using AI, not just in terms of AI features that you might be introducing to your organization, but have you been using AI to implement new technology? I'd love to hear your experience, even if it's just using Copilot to help you create PowerPoint slides, or if it's using Claude to create some code or whatever. I'm just curious to hear if, when, and how you've started to use AI, or you've seen it to be most effective. Thanks for answering this question here, Driss on X. The first comment I think I've gotten to here from X. Driss says, built an AI agent that customizes NetSuite based on user business needs from order to cash. Very cool. I think there's going to be a lot more of that, I think, in the NetSuite space, but also other areas as well, especially as you get into, like, I know NetSuite has its platform that you can build technology on, but Salesforce and some of these other platform as a service types of solutions, I imagine that's going to be a big thing. This is the biggest response, the longest response of any so far. So talk about opening a can of worms. It is just going crazy here. And in real time on a client delivery project, this is lightning speed fast, but when you're live in front of people watching, it is super slow. And here we go. All right, it looks like we lost our feed here, and we're right in the middle of a really good question, or an answer I was really excited to give. So let's get our technical issue figured out. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and answer that question in more detail here in just a moment. And we're also going to get into why your employees are quietly resisting AI. So stick around. We've got a lot more to cover in this episode of Transformation Ground.
I'm Greg Benton. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Third Stage Consulting. And if you are embarking on your digital transformation journey, or in the middle of that journey in 2026, you're going to want to see our digital transformation report. This latest edition really dives into a lot of the key trends that we're seeing in the marketplace and the ecosystem right now. It also highlights a number of the things that are happening with AI being an important component and integral part of the ERP systems that are leading the way right now. Also, the shift toward composable and best-of-breed cloud solutions is really accelerating the decline of monolithic ERP replacement. The opportunity to download the report is found at thirdstage-consulting.com. And you'll also find other tools that will help you in the initiatives and the business planning that you're doing for 2026. Don't leave phase zero without it. Reach out today.
I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report, or a free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that'll allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode.
Here comes all those fantasies taking me to my room.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 263. My name is Eric Kimberly, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And so, Darian, we cut off here, and you were the one that asked the question. I was starting to answer it. It took forever for AI to give me the response. It wasn't forever, but it was like 2 or 3 minutes, which is forever when you're live on the air. But it did give me a response here, a very long response that I was just starting to give, and then we lost our feed in the discussion here. So I want to jump into this real quick, and then I want to come back and see what thoughts you have after that whole discussion we had. But for those of you that were hanging on the edge of your seat, wondering what the differences are between SAP, Oracle, and Microsoft in terms of the top 5 risks. That was the prompt, and that was the controversial question that led to the demise of our stream here today. But the good news is we did get the answer we wanted here. So the universal top 5 challenges per third stage's own research across 1,000 plus transformations. Number 1, organizational change in the people part of transformation. So that doesn't change. Number 2, transformation misalignment, strategic objectives. Number 3, difficulty managing or addressing deficiencies with the system integrator. Number 4, clarity of business processes. And number 5, difficulties of data migration. So those are the 5 most common risks, top 5 risks across SAP, Oracle, Microsoft implementations. So the question is then, how do the risks vary, or do they vary or differ for SAP versus Oracle versus Microsoft? And it's a really cool question because AI gave a really detailed answer here. And it said, so it starts off with SAP and gives SA specific risk profiles. So number 1 on the SAP specific risk profile is product complexity and deep integration cascading risk, which makes sense because SAP is such a big product. It is such an end-to-end massive beast of a system, for better or for worse. And it creates a situation where it's like a domino effect, where you break one thing, you change one thing in the system, and it affects a lot of things downstream, which is its strength on one hand, but it's also a risk when you go to implement it. Number 2 on the list of SAP specific risks, then, and again, these are in addition to, or these are unique to these products. So it's not saying the first top 5 I went through isn't relevant. It's just saying these are additional risks that are specific to SAP in this case. So number 2, SAP specific risk is product rigidity, and then the customize versus adapt dilemma. So clean core, that whole thing becomes a big discussion point here. Number 3, incomplete product and functional gaps. So there's a lot of things that R3 and ECC had that have not yet been migrated to ECC, and or have not yet been migrated to S4HANA, maybe never will be, or in some cases they did get migrated, but then those capabilities got discontinued. For example, they had a customer portal that we had a client that was implementing, and that got discontinued or decommissioned right in the middle of the implementation of S4HANA. It was S4HANA's module that they had decommissioned in that case. So you just have to know what exactly you're getting, and you also have to know that could change in the future based on the product roadmap, and you won't have as much flexibility to change it if you don't like it. Deficiencies with Activate methodology. It's very focused on an agile approach to implementation, but S4HANA implementations are more integrated than agile would suggest it's going to be able to handle. So that's a issue. And then number 5 is the system integrator conflict of interest / big 4 dominance. So these big SIs that have a competing self-interest to the things that are important to you is number 5 on the list. Then if you get to D365 specific risks, top 5, number 1 is flexibility as a double-edged sword. Number 2, highly fragmented, unregulated partner ecosystem. Number 3, myopic technology focus and underinvestment in people and process. Number 4, incomplete cloud migration of functional gaps between D365 and the legacy systems. And then number 5 is false expectations from a familiar UI. So because people are familiar with the Microsoft user interface, there's a perception or expectation that's going to be easier to use, and then they realize it's more difficult than using Windows or just Microsoft Teams or whatever. That can create challenges there. And then the Oracle specific top 5, technical complexities, number 1, immature cloud capabilities, number 2, number 3, sales driven overselling and fit gap misrepresentation. So this is the only one where there's like a sales related issue on how Oracle is sold. And then number 4 is people process neglect due to the technical complexity, which that one is actually pretty common, I would think, across all 3, but it's saying it's more specific to Oracle. Qualitatively, I don't know that I agree that that's any more specific to Oracle, but that's what AI tells us is true. Number 5 is performance and scaling concerns. So can it scale for the largest organizations? And then it goes through and it actually gives a comparison platform by platform of each of these risks and talks about how they vary, and it gives you clients or vendor specific things that should be taken into account there. So it's super cool, really good stuff that it unpacked there for us. But what were your thoughts and takeaways after hearing this conversation and these prompts and these interactions with the AI tool set, Darian?
Yeah, well, like you said, I feel like it does work pretty fast given that it only takes a couple minutes for it to generate that much information, which is obviously super helpful and useful, especially to not only you guys, but to clients and different things like that. Obviously, on the live stream, it does seem slow because you pressure's on when you're on a live, but the amount of information that is able to be in there is super cool, I find. And the prompts you're able to give it, you're basically able to ask it anything. And I know you were hiding a lot of the client names, but I'm sure on the day to day when you're able to then go in and look at what specific clients it's referring to and different things like that, it even gets more useful. So all of that was super interesting. I guess one main question I have for you, Eric, is what is your best way that you use this AI tool on the day to day, and how does it help you save time, energy, all of those things?
Well, just in the last few weeks, so we've spent months now just loading it, training it, testing it, et cetera, et cetera. And I have not been as involved as in hindsight. I wish I would have been just more involved, not because the team needed it necessarily, but just so I could have gotten more comfortable and familiar with the capabilities sooner. But now that I've dug in and I've continued to load just my own stuff into it, because I've got lots of data, from our shared repositories that others don't know exist and things of that nature. So I've tried to load as much of that information as possible into the tool. I've tried to use it as much as I can just to teach myself, really. I've been just trying to understand and test my own theories of what I think, which has all been, some of it's been data driven. It's all been data driven, but it's just a matter of, do I have a actual benchmark, a measurable benchmark to use, or is it data driven in that I just have seen it 100 times and then I've got my own perception? So it's been really interesting to test that. So even the example of, what was the example of the thing that I didn't know? Something came up and I didn't know. And I said, oh, that's different. I wouldn't have thought that. I can't remember what it is now. It was just not even an hour ago and I already forgot, but I did highlight it in my notes here. So I will get back to it. But, it's partially to learn from the data, but it's also for me, maybe even more powerful as a leader. Now I can go into each project and say, help me understand what the major risks of this project are. What should I be aware of? Or where does this client and project team need the most help right now? And so I can then proactively go pursue those things rather than waiting for someone to tell me that, hey, we've got a problem, or waiting for the next steering committee meeting that I might be in to hear that there's a problem. And it's also helped me too. It actually helped me just last week. I had to go to a client and consume a massive amount of information and do a risk assessment for a client that I hadn't been super involved with other than steering committee meetings. Really, I mean, for the most part, it's been mostly steering committee meetings. So I just hear the stuff that bubbles all the way up. I wasn't getting down into the weeds of what was happening. So I was able to go into the tool and then understand what's happening across the board with testing, because they're in the testing cycle right now. And there's some risks that have percolated during the testing cycle. So I was able to go ask, what are the major testing risks? What are the challenges? Why is this a problem? And it was able to give me a super detailed amount of information of why it is. It would cite specific meetings, specific decisions, specific things that it captured in the AI tool that were happening that I wouldn't have known about otherwise because I wasn't in those meetings. So as a leader, it helps me scale my visibility across all of our clients, which is really cool because I've always dreamed and wanted to be involved with every single client we have, but it's just not feasible anymore as big as we've gotten. But now I can go back to the days of when we were like 5 people at third stage and I could just be involved in every project. Now I feel like it's back to those days in some ways because I can go scale my knowledge across, 30 or 40 different clients now instead of just a small handful. So those are the big ways I've been using it.
For sure. And then I have one question on like a main takeaway on AI and how this tool can help. In your opinion, how does AI amplify advisory capability rather than replace the judgment that you guys are known to give to companies?
Well, you have to take it all with a grain of salt because, and sometimes AI will call itself out, like the one point about the system integrator issues that clients were having and I think that it said that was the number 2 risk that our clients were facing. But then it gave me the caveat but the reason why it's number 2 might be because they're already having problems with their SI, which is why they hired you in the first place. So that was a good call out that if AI hadn't given that to me, you have to rely on the human mind to think of that. And who knows, maybe I would have thought of that, maybe not. It doesn't matter at this point because AI told me. So the fact of the matter is I got what I needed. But then there's other things like, like you heard me real time when there's a question about, or is the comment about tenure? I think it was saying the employees that have been around for longer are actually they rate the highest in organizational readiness. So that is a fact. That is what AI analyzed, and I believe AI when it says that. But me as a human now, I have to ask, but is that a good thing? A good thing that a highly tenured employee feels comfortable with the status quo and is happy and rates themselves high? That's misleading. So the data says one thing that's misleading that AI I don't think is going to capture. So you still have to think and use the data to understand what it means. You can't just take it all at face value. So you have to dig into it, unpack it a bit more, and understand the why. And some of the why you can get to with AI, but some of it you're just not going to. You're going to have to connect the dots in your own mind with why, what you think cause and effect might be, and certainly how to execute is way different than what AI can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point there on, AI knows what it knows and it doesn't know what it doesn't know. So that's where humans come in and can actually dig into the why behind things and why is it reading it this way and different things like that.
Yeah.
Which is a great point. But I'm excited to get into, I know you talked a little bit about employees. I know we're going to talk more here about employees specifically with AI as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is something that I've actually noticed it in our own company. We're technology forward thinking and technology driven. And we've noticed that, it's taken some time and some effort to get our own team excited about AI, because especially in consulting, it's knowledge based. It's your value as a consultant is largely based on the individual experience you have. And now if an AI tool comes along and threatens to potentially replicate that can be a big threat to consultants. And so I've seen it firsthand in our own team where there's a bit of resistance, or at the very least, people aren't super excited at first about AI, although they're getting very excited now that they're starting to use it more. But at the beginning, it just was more uncertainty and not understanding what it means for us as consultants. Are we trying to automate their jobs? Absolutely not. We're trying to give them a tool set to make them even smarter than they already are. So that's been our journey with AI. But the journey I want to talk about next is what most of our clients are feeling too, which is leadership is usually the first to get excited about AI, but then the front lines aren't as excited because they've got their day jobs, they've got their own priorities, they've got their status quo and their comfort levels that with where they're at right now. And so introducing AI is a big disruption to that. And so in this video that I posted to YouTube recently, I'm going to show it. We're going to play you a clip of it here. I talk about why your employees are resisting AI, why they're going to resist it, whether you know it or not, and what you can do to overcome that resistance and identify the resistance in the first place. So let's roll the clip and we'll come back and talk about it.
I talked about how there's a disconnect between what leaders think is happening with AI, what technologists think is happening with AI versus what employees are feeling boots on the ground. And what I want to do with you today is share with you 5 lessons that we've learned from helping clients through their AI initiatives, not only from a strategy perspective, but also from a change management perspective. What are those areas of resistance that we're seeing amongst employees on the front lines, and why are they resisting it? I'll start by summarizing and saying it's not coming from a bad place. Most employees are not interested in sabotaging AI initiatives. Most employees are not interested in disrupting the flow and the evolution of your organization. And most employees are not interested in being insubordinate or refusing to follow the leadership of the organization. Instead, there are 5 basic human dynamics that are at play with how employees are resisting AI. The first is job security anxiety. When you read the headlines about what AI is going to do to society in the future, many of those headlines feature alarmist types of data suggesting that millions or maybe even tens of millions of jobs might be lost or displaced or somehow negatively impacted in the long term. So regardless of whether or not this is the case with your organization or the intent of your organization, people's mindset focuses on some of those headline news articles that they see in mainstream media. And this may turn out to materialize as well, but it's not even a matter of whether or not the alarmists are right and AI becomes a replacement for human jobs in the future. The fact of the matter is people perceive that it might, and that fear and uncertainty is what creates doubt when it comes to job security. A second reason why employees are resisting AI is because AI in many cases is being introduced without purpose. There's just pressure to introduce AI to the organization. A lot of times the board of directors and the shareholders of the organization are pushing management teams to adopt AI because they know long-term AI may and very well likely could improve the productivity and effectiveness and cost structure of organizations longer term. Now, of course, this ties back to the first fear that employees have, is that they fear their job loss and their job security, but it also, beyond that, creates a lack of certainty around why the organization is going through the project, why they're deploying AI, and what they expect the organization to look like after they use AI within the organization. A third reason why employees are resisting AI in many organizations we work with is because leaders oftentimes put tools before trust, and they put the technology first, and the human part and the operational part they decide they want to figure out later. And this is understandable in some ways because AI is new. A lot of us are still uncertain as to how AI is going to change and impact our operations, so we don't have a lot of those answers. But when we don't have those answers as leaders, employees are going to have a hard time following if they don't have clarity and understanding of why we're deploying AI and what we hope to accomplish from it. So this is why it's so important to have a clear vision and a clear direction for what it is you hope to get out of your AI initiative. A fourth reason why employees are resisting AI is because there's a lack of certainty on how AI will affect their individual careers. I talked before about short-term job security being a concern for employees, but even beyond that, what does AI mean for their jobs going forward? How are they going to upskill themselves and become more relevant in today's AI-driven society? A lot of organizations are focusing on implementing that technology without necessarily investing in the people side of understanding how AI can be used and the people side of understanding the technological aspects of AI. So in the absence of that understanding, people are not going to feel confident in their jobs, and they're not going to know exactly how their career will unfold at your company and potentially future employers going forward. A fifth reason why employees are resisting AI on the front lines is because of change fatigue. Organizations have gone through a significant amount of technological change and operational change, and in many cases, organizational change in recent years, going back to COVID and even before COVID. Organizations have had to deal with a lot, and employees have had to deal with a lot. Technology has changed. A lot of organizations have moved to the cloud. A lot of organizations have been re-engineering their business processes and addressing other technological initiatives. And at some point, there's a breaking point where employees just can't consume and handle more change and still do their day-to-day jobs. So the change fatigue that many organizations are experiencing right now, especially in the face of economic uncertainty and globalization and other factors outside the realm of your technology project, you add all this up and you have a perfect storm and a backdrop of where employees start to resist further change because they can only handle so much change. So given the fact that AI is evolving so fast and disrupting organizations in mostly a positive way, potentially, it's also creating short-term negative disruption as it relates to employees. And it's important to understand these 5 reasons I've talked about here today on why employees are resisting that change. But what I want to do next is unpack these 5 things a little bit more and talk about why this resistance is actually rational, and more importantly, stay tuned to the end of the video because I'll share some tips on how to overcome this resistance. So resistance to change as it relates to AI amongst employees is something that may sound like a negative thing or a bad thing. But I want to summarize and start off by saying most of the time employees is not coming from a bad place when they resist change to AI or any other technology. Most of the time there's a good human basic instinct that feeds into that. For many, having skepticism around AI is not pure sabotage, it's more of a survival strategy. It's trying to understand and make sense of the world around them. When you have all these media outlets talking incessantly about AI and how great it is and how profitable it's going to make companies and how many jobs can be saved at all these different companies, it's understandable why people would wonder if AI really is a good thing for them, especially at an individual level. So they may not be leading with negativity, but something that's meant to be positive ends up becoming a negative thing when they don't have that certainty and understanding of why the organization is going through the process. The other source of resistance and the other human behavior aspect of resistance to AI is the fact that people have learned from past transformations that their organization has been through. If your organization has failed in past attempts to implement ERP or other types of enterprise technologies, or if you've just had troubled attempts along the way and it's been a pretty messy process, employees remember that. They have long-term memories and they remember the pain that the organization went through because in many cases they were part of that pain and they were direct recipients of that pain. So now when you throw in a new technology that's still not quite mature, it's still not proven, it still hasn't been widely accepted by most organizations, you can see why employees wonder if this is really a good thing and they're trying to make sense of it all. And third, another reason why I'd say resistance to AI is rational is because so many organizations are using AI very tactically at this point. A lot of them are still testing and piloting and trying to figure out how could AI help our business, and they don't necessarily have a bigger picture overarching strategy of how they're going to deploy AI and other technologies. So that's understandable from a leadership perspective, but you have to recognize that that uncertainty at the leadership level, that uncertainty around how AI is going to be used in your organization, creates uncertainty with employees, which then translates to resistance. So now that we've talked about some of the reasons why human behavior is natural and the resistance to AI is natural and understandable, let's shift gears and talk about what you can do about it to give yourself a better chance to succeed with your AI initiatives going forward. So what are leaders missing when they try to lead their employees through change? What are they missing that's causing employees to resist change? Well, first of all, I'd say it's not what you're doing necessarily that's causing employees to resist AI. It's what you're not doing. So let's talk about the things you can do. And let's also talk about the things that you should do less of as well. The first is to view AI as an organizational change initiative, not a technology initiative. It's really important to understand that yes, AI is a really cool technology. It's very advanced, it's very sophisticated, becoming very sophisticated. It's exciting in many cases. It still should be treated as an organizational initiative. It should not lead the change. It should enable whatever changes you're trying to accomplish. So if you're trying to be more efficient, if you're trying to provide better customer service, if you're trying to build better products, whatever the case may be, that should be the driving factor with AI supporting. So that gives you a sense of purpose, and it gives your employees a sense of purpose that's easier to follow than just let's go implement AI and see what happens. Second is that adoption is emotional, and leaders need to understand that. Employees follow and they embrace new technologies, and they want to support change initiatives when they understand what's happening, when they feel secure, and when the emotions are positive for them. The minute those emotions turn negative or come from a place of uncertainty, fear, or doubt, that's where people start to resist change. So as a leader, one question to ask yourself is, how can I lead this change in a way that gets rid of that FUD, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt? And how can we translate that negative emotion into something more positive, something that gets them excited, something that helps them see the vision of what the future can be for the organization, but more importantly, what's in it for them? How would it help their career? How will it help them be better at their jobs day to day? How will it give them the confidence to navigate this future of work that we're embracing at the moment? So these are all things you've got to think about as a leader, and things that you can do to help ensure that your people do ultimately follow. A third thing that leaders can do to help ensure that people follow AI initiatives and strategies is to involve them in use case definition. Involve your employees in trying to pilot ideas or to test AI in certain parts of their business. Perhaps you have different work groups that you task them with finding one of the biggest challenges they're facing, one of the biggest inefficiencies or pain points for their part of the organization, and invite them to come up with ideas on how they could use AI to potentially solve those problems. And the minute you get those people involved in the decision process and in the piloting process, the minute you do two things. One is you get a lot of good ideas from the front lines that you probably wouldn't have thought of inside the boardroom or from an ivory tower. But secondly, now you've gotten their buy-in. They are part of the solution, and they feel a lot more confident. They feel like they have ownership, and they're not threatened by the change, and the change isn't just happening to them. So it's really a win-win across the board. It's good for the organization, it's good for you as a leader, and it's good for the employees on the front lines as well. And then finally, even though AI is a big unknown and you're probably trying to figure out a lot of details around what AI can and can't do, it's important to measure success not in terms of the technology, but in the adoption. How many employees are using AI? What's the success rate? What's the impact to the business? How is it affecting their job satisfaction? Really measuring and understanding how AI is affecting the organization as a whole and as individual work groups and also individual people. That's something that will go a long way towards building confidence and getting people to turn a negative emotion, a resistance-based emotion, into something that's more focused on being a part of the solution and being excited about the solution. At the end of the day, if I were to leave you with one piece of advice, it'd be that you need to remember that AI strategies are not going to fail because of the technology itself. AI is evolving, it's advancing very quickly. It's still not perfect. There's still imperfections and hallucinations and other things we've got to worry about. Data governance is still important. The technology itself needs attention, but at the end of the day, the more you can focus on the people side of the equation, the more successful these initiatives are going to be, and the less likely it is that people are going to resist the change and feel threatened by the changes. Because remember, employees typically aren't going to resist change in the form of open rebellion and protest. They're going to do it quietly, they're going to do it behind the scenes, under the radar, and they're going to do it behind closed doors. And that's the hard change resistance to overcome.
So that was our clip explaining why and how employees resist AI. What were your thoughts and takeaways from that, Darian?
Yeah, I think my first takeaway was I agree with the first driver is the job security anxiety. That definitely makes sense. Even if leadership does not intend to displace the employees, that I think subconsciously or consciously is something that comes to mind for everybody when they hear AI. And then with that too, I think change fatigue can definitely be real as well. So I definitely agreed with that point. So after years of transformation or cloud moves, progress redesign, and then like everything that happened with COVID and on, I think many teams are at capacity and don't necessarily like have the capability and want to have to change again and learn something new and do something new again. So I found that point super interesting. But Eric, I have a couple follow-up questions on this article. And one of them being, what are the earliest signs that AI resistance is happening, even when the leaders think that adoption is fine?
Well, I think it's a lot like we talked about earlier in the segment, where when we were analyzing some of our past projects, we saw data that suggested that people rated pretty high, highly tenured people rated their overall organizational readiness or their self readiness for change very high. And I think the reason I come back to that is because one thing I've noticed is that when leaders hear employees say, "Yeah, our current tool set sucks. We can't wait to get something new," they assume, okay, these guys are on board. They are not going to resist the change, and they're not going to resist it right at that moment in time. When they're going to resist it is when they get into what the tool is and how it's going to affect their jobs. That's when they start to resist it. So it's almost like the tip of the iceberg. You can't even see the tip of the iceberg at the start of a project. Most leaders don't see the tip of the iceberg. They might, and even if they do see the tip, they don't understand the full impact that iceberg could have on the disruption to the organization. So I think it's just misleading to think that because people are excited now, they're saying all the right things, and they probably believe it. I'm not suggesting that employees lie. They don't lie necessarily, and most of the time they're not lying. What's usually happening is right now they're excited, but then 6 months from now, 12 months from now, when they see like, wow, this is a huge change and this is going to be hard for me and my colleagues to go through this change, that's when you start to see resistance to change, especially if it totally overhauls your process, the way you're structurally organized, if you change your job roles and responsibilities. I mean, that's a lot of change for the average person to take on. So you just have to assume that it's going to be a lot worse or a lot more resistance than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And back to my point about the change fatigue, and you mentioned it there as well. How do you prioritize AI use cases so teams feel relief instead of the more change burden?
Yeah, you do have to be careful with this because AI is something that's going to take years of adoption. I mean, I don't imagine many organizations are just going to have a 12-month AI initiative and then they're done. It's going to be a 12-month series of pilots and rolling out tools, and then it's going to be years of constant continuous improvement after that. And so you just have to be mindful of it. I mean, you just have to be planned and incrementally plan it. I think is probably the best way to put it. You want to make sure that you're not biting off more than you can chew. You have to understand that it's an ongoing journey, and you have to pace yourself accordingly. You don't want to have a mad dash sprint and then the race never ends. You just keep sprinting. You want to make sure that people can do their real jobs and that it's not too disruptive too fast.
Yeah, absolutely. One last question with this is, how do you prevent AI pilots from becoming scattered experiments with no strategic through line?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's a common issue, common problem. One thing that we've seen work is you can have a level of innovation and testing at the lower levels that's sort of, call it, I don't know if you call it unsupervised. It's not that's unsupervised, but it's more you're testing and innovating. You haven't necessarily defined a clear process yet, but you're trying different ways of using AI. Once those use cases are proven, then you can bubble those up to a more central organizational wide AI competency center that could then scale it across the organization as appropriate. So I think it's okay to test and innovate, but you want to make sure you've got some governance for the broader organization. So you need to find that right balance of governance to where you've got a certain amount of innovation on the front lines, but there's also a certain amount of governance at a more central level, and you've got to have both in order to truly tap into the potential of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting AI filled episode today. I feel like all the different topics were super, super interesting, and I am looking forward to see how they develop over time.
Yeah, likewise. This will be super fun. We'll have to have Mission Control back on the show here soon, especially as it learns more. And in the coming weeks and months, it's going to have even more powerful capabilities. So it'll be even a better guest next time. So we'll have Mission Control AI back on the show here. And if you'd like to learn more about Mission Control and how you could apply to your organization, your digital transformation, feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. And if you'd like to learn more about any sort of consulting or staffing needs you have for your project, feel free to reach out to me as well. We can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday, transformationgroundcontrol.com. My name's Eric Kimberling with Darian Chwialkowski. This is Transformation Ground Control. We'll see you next week. Have a great week in the meantime, and we will see you soon. Take care.
Ground control is a major time.